So I'm terrified of dolls. I know it sounds stupid, but they just creep me out. So of course, I decided to do a video on a doll famous for being haunted. If you like paranormal activity, you've probably heard of Robert the Doll, and if you haven't, buckle up. Hello everyone, my name is Doodle. Welcome to my channel. I talk about true crime, paranormal events, and writing. I want to give a heads up, this story might not be appropriate for all audiences. It contains descriptions of haunted dolls, frightening themes, and it's just kind of scary to begin with. But let's get into the story. Who is Robert the Doll, and who did he belong to? From what I could find, Robert the Doll, who I will be referring to as Robert for the sake of brevity, was a gift to a boy named Robert Eugene Otto in the early 1900s. Robert Eugene was born in 1900, so it was sometime around then, but I couldn't find the exact date. Sorry. Robert Eugene went by Gene, which is how I will be referring to him throughout the story. There are actually two stories I can find about who gave it to him. Some people say that Robert was a gift from Gene's grandfather, and some say it was a gift from one of the servants, who had recently been fired for practicing witchcraft and wanted to curse him. Gene's mother scolded Gene for words. Yes, words. Gene's mother scolded him for going by Gene instead of Robert, but Gene insisted it was Robert's name and he couldn't take it from him. Robert is a roughly 3-foot-tall doll with button eyes, dressed in a sailor outfit, holding a stuffed animal puppy. I'm not going to put a photo up on the screen, but you can look it up if you want. Gene was in love with this doll. Robert had his own spot at the table where Gene would sneak him bites of food. Gene also took Robert with him everywhere. Gene's family was very wealthy, so I'm assuming Robert had private tutors and did not go to a public school, but Gene would even bring Robert to class with him. Gene could often be heard talking to Robert in his toy room, playing with him and whatnot. While this might be normal, the servants and his mother would often hear a childish voice and a very low voice that a child could not have possibly made coming from his room. From time to time, he would appear extremely agitated and would worry his mother and the servants. Sometimes, when his mother would come into his room, she would find Gene sitting in the corner, cowering, while Robert sat on the bed with an angry look on his face, if a doll can have facial expressions. Whenever things would happen around the house, Gene would blame it on Robert. Gene's toys would be found strewn around his playroom and mutilated, and Gene would insist that Robert did it. Giggling would often be heard around his room, even if he wasn't in there. Gene would always say Robert did it whenever anything happened, but he would always take his punishments. The Otto family was very wealthy, as I previously said, and had a lot of servants. But as Gene/Robert's behavior was beginning to get out of control, they had a harder and harder time keeping their house staffed. Eventually, his family decided enough was enough. They got a recommendation from a great aunt to put Robert in the attic. Gene's parents placed Robert in a box and kept him in the attic, and things went back to normal. Then Gene's father died. Gene inherited the house he grew up in and everything in it, including Robert. Gene had gotten married to a woman named Annette by then, and was an artist. He decided the spacious house would be a perfect environment for him to paint. As far as I could find, he did not have children, so, yeah. He was cleaning out the attic. You know when you inherit a giant Victorian, you just gotta clean out a bit, get the cobwebs. He was in the attic, and he found Robert. Initially, nothing changed. Gene showed Robert his wife and was like, "Look what I found, honey." And she was like, "Cool. I'm not an adult or anything, but I assume when you are one, if your parents have just died and you inherit their house, and then you find a childhood toy, it would be pretty comforting." That's probably what everyone else was thinking too. But Gene started growing more and more attached to Robert all over again. He would insist on Robert having his own spot at the table, and even went so far as to ask his wife if Robert could sleep in their bed with them. She was like, "No, you're an adult. This is kind of weird, and this doll is like 3 feet tall. This is a little scary." But Gene kept pressing. Eventually, they settled on letting Robert stay in their room. Unfortunately, this wasn't the end of it. Gene's wife constantly complained of nightmares and altogether an uneasy feeling whenever she was in her bedroom. If that wasn't enough, there were rumors that Gene abused his wife and would blame it on Robert. School children walking home would say that they saw Robert sitting in the window, and then sometimes he would move or not be there at all. Eventually, Annette moved Robert back to the attic. Gene got very upset about this, claiming Robert didn't like the attic. He placed Robert in the turret room, where Gene would spend the rest of his time painting. He claimed Robert liked the view from there. The Otto's marriage started deteriorating, ending with the two living separately in everything but name and law. The home was definitely big enough to allow for this, letting them each have their own spaces. This continued on until Annette died in 1945, and Gene died in 1974. Annette supposedly went insane and died from unknown causes. After Gene died, his house was to be sold. and sold it was. I mean, the house was really pretty. Just look up pictures. So, of course, it sold fast. That was until stories started getting out. People who lived in the house said that Robert would play tricks on them, sometimes locking them in the attic. Oftentimes, it was said that evil laughter could be heard whenever walking past the turret room, Robert's favorite room, if you remember. People also said that if they badmouthed Jean, they could see Robert's face distort into a frown. One of the owners said that he woke up one night with Robert sitting at the edge of his bed, giggling and holding a kitchen knife. Needless to say, they left. Robert was eventually moved to a museum in Key West where he was kept in a glass box. Despite the fact that his environment changed, Robert remained mischievous. Visitors and employees would often say they saw him moving and could often be seen scowling. One night, after an employee cleaned Robert, dust him off and everything, it's kind of an old toy, so you want to make sure you take good care of him. He said that, he turned the lights off, he left and came back the next day. All the lights were on and Robert was sitting in a completely different position with a fresh layer of dust on him. To this day, bad things happen to those who bad talk Robert or Jean in Robert's presence. If you want to take pictures with him, you have to ask permission. If he gives it, his head will tilt slightly. If he doesn't do this, but you still take a picture, you and anyone you are with will be cursed. One such story is as follows. A guy and his girlfriend were making fun of Robert, just poking fun at him like, man, it's just a doll, or whatever. When they were going home, they got into a horrible motorcycle accident. The girl survived, but the man died. She said that they were talking about Robert when they crashed. And that's the story of Robert the doll. To this day, he resides in the same museum in Key West. What do you think? Was it real, or was it a man with a mental illness and mass hysteria and a desire for things to be haunted? Let me know in the comments down below. If you liked the video, please consider liking and subscribing, as it takes a long time to research and film for these videos. If there's something else you want me to cover, let me know in the comments below. As always, citations are in the description if you want to check these sites out. Thank you so much for watching. This is Doodle signing out.